New York was buzzing. Arthur Ashe Stadium, lit up by floodlights slicing through the warm September night, pulsed with the sound of thousands of voices. Flags waved, camera flashes cut through the air like tiny bolts of lightning, and the squeaking of sneakers on the blue court echoed like steady thunder. It was the 2025 U.S. Open Final, Carlos Alcaraz versus Jannik Sinner, and the city was holding its breath. Steve and Joanna Myers blended into the crowd. After weeks on the road, late-night chases, and bodies buried in forgotten cemeteries, they were searching for a moment that felt normal. Steve, wearing a leather jacket despite the New York heat, balanced a tub of popcorn on his lap. Joanna, notebook in hand, was scribbling quick notes about everything around them. The tension in the fans, the chants erupting after every point, the almost electric energy in the air. For a few hours, they looked like just two regular young people in a packed stadium. The match was intense. Sinner showed speed and consistency, but Alcaraz answered with power and precision, each swing of the racket cracking through the air like a gunshot. The crowd swung between total silence and bursts of applause. Steve nibbled on popcorn, eyes squinting. "This kid plays like he's fighting fate," he said, half amused. Joanna gave a small smirk. "Or maybe he just wants to prove he's more stubborn than his opponent. Sounds like someone I know." After hours of tension, Alcaraz took the win with a brilliant final run. The crowd exploded with joy. Spanish flags waved like waves in a sea of people, and the champion's name echoed in unison. Steve leaned toward his sister, pointing at the court. "See that? That guy knows how to finish a fight, right?" Joanna raised an eyebrow, sarcastic. "Unlike you, who nearly kills himself just to prove he never gives up." The crowd started moving toward the exits, but the siblings stayed with the wave of people heading down to the edge of the court, curious to see the awards ceremony. The air smelled like sweat, disinfectant, and damp synthetic grass. Alcaraz, breathless, bent over with his hands on his knees for a moment before being guided toward the locker room. He looked drained, human in his exhaustion, sweat dripping down his face, shoulders heavy after the battle. Minutes later, when he came back out to lift the trophy, something felt off. Steve noticed it first. The posture was too stiff, the smile looked rehearsed, and the shine in his eyes caught the camera flashes in a weird, almost metallic way. Joanna, watching with an almost instinctive sharpness, felt a chill run down her spine. There was no joy, no human spark in the champion now getting deafening applause, just coldness. She leaned in quietly to her brother, her voice low and steady. "Stevie, that's not the same guy who played the final." Steve didn't answer right away. His green eyes narrowed, tracking the Alcaraz, smiling at the cameras, every move as staged as a scene from a play. The crowd roared, blind in its celebration. But to the Myers siblings, something dark had just stepped onto the stage of glory. The ceremony went on with plenty of flash and noise. The Alcaraz smiled for the cameras, flags were raised around him, and the official voices announced his historic victory. But while the crowd cheered, Steve and Joanna focused on details no one else seemed to notice. The champion greeted officials with a mechanical handshake, lacking the warmth of exhaustion turned into triumph. He answered reporters with short, dry phrases, like he was reading from a script he didn't understand. There was no joy in the victory. None of that human spark no athlete can hide when glory is real. Joanna watched closely. His eyes caught the flash of the cameras with a metallic, unsettling gleam. Steve, more blunt, murmured under his breath, "He looks like a photograph, not a person." Joanna replied, her tone calm but firm, "And you know just as well as I do what that means." As the crowd began to thin out, the siblings made their way toward the backstage area. A security guard stepped in to block their path, but Steve pulled a makeshift badge from his pocket, wearing the confident tone of someone who belonged there. "Spanish press. We need quick access to the locker room. The boss inside asked for exclusive footage." The man hesitated. Joanna stood firm beside him, arms crossed, giving the guard an impatient stare. He sighed, stepped aside, and let them through. The backstage halls felt nothing like the energy of the arena. Cold, quiet, smelling of cheap disinfectant mixed with rust. But there was something else in the air, something not part of the usual sports routine. Steve stopped, took a deep breath, and frowned. "You smell that? It's like old blood. But there's something else, smells like burnt flesh." Joanna nodded, her eyes scanning the walls lit by flickering fluorescent lights. Yeah, this smell isn't just athlete sweat. They reached Alcaraz's locker room. The door was ajar, and as they pushed it open, the scene showed clear signs of haste. Towels were tossed across the floor, the player's sweaty shirt draped over the bench, and the air was thick with moisture and a sour scent. Steve crouched, eyes narrowing at something stuck to the wooden seat. Using a tissue, he carefully removed the fragment, a whitish, sticky film, like dried, thin human skin. He sealed it in a plastic bag, his expression dark. This isn't normal, not even close. Joanna scanned the floor. The flickering light lit up smeared marks, uneven trails that stretched across the tile and vanished under a side door. She knelt, running her fingers over the dark stains. Drag marks. Someone was taken out of here, probably hurt. The two shared a heavy, silent look. Joanna was the first to speak. That's shapeshifter skin, Stevie. I've seen it in Dad's notes. Steve zipped the plastic bag shut tightly. Then that means he's not the real champion. The real one's locked up somewhere down here. The roar of the arena felt distant now. But for the Myers siblings, the match had just begun. The arena, once bursting with energy, was now emptying out in waves of voices fading through the gates. Only cleaning staff, a few late reporters, and their muffled conversations remained in the hallways. Steve and Joanna made their way toward the stadium's restricted areas, slipping through doors marked "Authorized Personnel Only." The atmosphere shifted from the polished commercial shine to the raw backstage grit, smelling of mold and rust. The distant drip of water mixed with the constant hum of flickering fluorescent lights, some blinking like nervous eyes. A hurried journalist adjusting his press badge muttered as he passed them, "Never seen a guy bounce back that fast." Went into the locker room wrecked and showed up at the press conference like nothing happened. Joanna shot a quick glance at Steve. It wasn't proof, but it added to the growing sense that something was wrong. They kept walking, alert to every detail. Steve pulled out his phone and opened an app he had modified to tap into security systems. After a few quick commands, the screen showed a list of internal cameras. He leaned against the wall, scrolling rapidly through the footage. Joanna stood watch, arms crossed, eyes locked on the empty hallway. Suddenly, Steve stopped scrolling and frowned. Got it. The screen showed the footage. Carlos Alcaraz entering the locker room, a towel still draped over his shoulders. Steve fast-forwarded. Time passed. The door stayed shut. When it finally opened, the person who walked out looked flawless. Clean uniform, dry hair, steady posture. Steve frowned again, suspicious. Okay, that could still be normal. Joanna leaned in for a better look. The Alcaraz walked down the hallway toward the press room, but just for a second he turned his face toward the security camera. His eyes flashed with a yellowish metallic gleam, a blink of light that was impossible to miss. Steve paused the video and zoomed in. The gleam was still there, cold, inhuman. Joanna opened her notebook and wrote in bold, steady letters, "Anomalous reflection. Stolen identity. Shapeshifter pattern." She closed it and looked at her brother. The real one never left. He's still hidden somewhere down in this basement. The siblings followed the hallway to a service stairwell, descending into the lower levels of the stadium. The air grew heavier, thick with mold and grime. The once smooth walls now showed cracks and dark streaks of moisture. The distant hum of generators vibrated beneath their feet. Steve swept his flashlight through the corners, revealing layers of dust and traces of recent movement. On the floor, drag marks crossed patches of rust. It looked as if someone had been pulled against their will, leaving long, uneven streaks behind. Joanna crouched down, examining the trail. Looks like dried blood mixed with dirt. He was taken this way. Steve kept his gun close, tense in the uncomfortable silence. Every step seemed too loud. Every flicker of movement in the corner of his eye carried the feeling that they weren't alone. The lights grew fewer, leaving stretches of complete darkness. The metallic smell was getting stronger. They kept following the trail, going deeper and deeper, until the stadium above felt like a distant world. The thick silence, the metallic scent in the air, and the marks on the floor all told the same story. The creature had been there not long ago. Whether the shapeshifter had already moved on didn't matter. The tunnel still breathed with its presence, as if something unnatural lingered in the air. Down there, every detail could be a clue, but if they underestimated what they were facing, every detail could also become a trap. The narrow hallway led to a forgotten wing of the stadium, where the paint peeled from the walls and moisture had taken over. Exposed pipes dripped at uneven intervals, the sound echoing like drops in a cave. The air was thick, smelling of rust and built-up sweat. Steve kept the shotgun pressed against his chest, flashlight in his other hand. Joanna walked a few steps behind, eyes locked on the marks along the floor. The drag trails mixed with dried bloodstains led to a metal door, older than the rest of the structure. A new padlock kept it shut. Steve gave it a quick once-over, then took a steady breath. This isn't gonna stop us. With a precise swing, he used a crowbar from his backpack and smashed the padlock with a sharp metallic crack. The door groaned loudly as it opened, revealing a suffocating space. The maintenance room was tight, lit only by a flickering fluorescent light with no rhythm. Old tools and boxes of sports gear were stacked around, and the floor was stained with oil and thick dust. In the center, tied to an iron chair with heavy shackles, was Carlos Alcaraz. His face was bruised in shades of red and purple, and the skin on his wrists was raw and scraped from fighting the restraints. A dirty cloth gagged his mouth, muffling the sounds of his struggle. Sweat ran down his face, and his wide eyes locked onto the two hunters the moment the door opened. Joanna was the first to approach. She carefully removed the gag, and the tennis player gasped for air, breathing in like he'd just surfaced from underwater. His voice came out shaky, choked. "No, that's not me up there. That thing, it took my place." Steve watched closely, analyzing every detail of the battered figure in front of him. The shackles weren't standard. They were thick, heavy steel, like whatever did this was determined to stop any escape. He crouched down, inspecting the injured wrists. Alcaraz only nodded, tears building at the corners of his eyes. His breathing was shallow, tight with fear. Joanna pulled a water bottle from her backpack and handed it to the player. He drank in quick gulps, choking slightly, but grateful. His shoulders shook under the weight of exhaustion and terror. Joanna kept her voice steady, though soft. "You're safe now. We're getting you out of here." As Steve worked to break the chains, each snap of metal echoed through the room, blending with the flickering buzz of the light above. Finally, the shackles clattered to the floor, freeing the champion's bruised wrists. Alcaraz braced himself on the chair, trying to stand, his legs still trembling. Steve grabbed his arm to support him. "Easy. You've been through a lot." His condition was the undeniable proof that the man the world was cheering for upstairs couldn't be the real champion. What the Myers siblings had in front of them was the victim, and behind the glorious facade, a predator had taken his place. Steve helped him take his first steps out of the maintenance room. The air in the hallways, still damp and soaked with rust, felt lighter than the suffocating air of that prison. "Easy. You're getting out of here in one piece," Steve said, steady and calm. Joanna led the way, flashlight raised and silver knife in hand. The trio moved silently until a sound made them stop, heavy footsteps echoing against the concrete walls. Alcaraz's heart raced. From the darkness ahead came a flawless version of himself. Clean uniform, dry hair, cold expression. The shapeshifter. It smiled with a calm that felt fake. "Funny, you saved the copy, but who do you think the world's gonna believe?" The real Alcaraz shivered behind Steve. Joanna narrowed her eyes, tightening her grip on the knife. "You won't keep that mask for long." The shapeshifter moved first. Steve shoved the real champion against the wall to shield him and raised the shotgun, firing. The blast exploded through the narrow hallway. The fake Alcaraz's body was thrown back, but it rose immediately, the wound healing in a grotesque way under the flickering light. The creature charged at him with inhuman speed, knocking Steve to the ground. The shotgun slid across the wet floor. They rolled, fists landing like stone hitting stone. The shapeshifter was brutally strong, and Steve's face slammed against the concrete. Joanna rushed in and slashed at the creature's chest with the silver knife. It dodged at the last second and, in a flash, grabbed her arm, twisting it until it cracked. She bit her lip to keep from screaming, spun her body, and used the pain as momentum to drive the blade into its thigh. The monster roared and staggered back, Its eyes flashed as it glared at the siblings. The smell of rotting flesh and slick skin filled the hallway. Steve used the moment to reach for the fallen shotgun. He aimed and fired again. This time the shapeshifter stumbled backward, slamming into a pipe that burst open. Dirty water sprayed out, flooding the floor. Still, the creature didn't fall. It cast one last look at them, yellow eyes glowing in the shadows. Not tonight. Then it bolted down the hallway, vanishing into the dark before anyone could react. Silence returned, broken only by their heavy breathing and the steady drip of the broken pipe. Joanna leaned against the wall, still gripping the bloody knife. Steve wiped the blood from his face and turned to the real Alcaraz. "He knows we're coming for him, but you're safe now." Joanna nodded, looking at the still shaking champion. "And the next step is to end this before he destroys more than just your career." Their mission was clear. The real Alcaraz was alive and free, but the hunt had only become more dangerous. Quick pause. You know that feeling of having a story in your head but not being able to get it down on paper? That frustration of staring at a blank screen, waiting for the perfect idea, and it just never comes? I've been there, and a lot of people are stuck in that same place right now. In the first pinned comment, there's a class that shows you how to break out of that cycle and start creating strong, original ideas that are ready to become stories. Even if you think you're not creative at all, if you feel like there's something inside your head trying to come out, give it a shot. Now hang tight, because what's coming next is going to give you chills. It was already deep into the New York night when Steve and Joanna got Carlos Alcaraz to safety. A trusted contact from the Hunters network had taken the tennis player to a temporary hideout outside Manhattan. Still shaken, he didn't have the strength to ask questions. He simply nodded, eyes filled with fear and exhaustion. The inherited Mustang cruised through the city's empty avenues as Joanna closed her notebook and rested it on her lap. "If I were a shapeshifter trying to keep up a lie this big, I wouldn't be crashing in a cheap hotel. He's hiding wherever the real Alcaraz lives." Steve nodded, adjusting his grip on the steering wheel. "Luxury apartment, penthouse in Manhattan. That's where he'll try to keep up the act." They reached the building just after 3 in the morning. It was a glass tower in the heart of the city, with a grand entrance and a marble-lit lobby. The overnight security guard didn't suspect a thing when Joanna flashed a fake medical badge, claiming there was an emergency with Mr. Alcaraz. Sleepy and unconcerned, he let them through without hesitation. They took the elevator to the top floor. The doors opened to a silent, carpeted hallway with just one door, the penthouse. Steve unlocked it in seconds using a set of tools. The door swung open slowly, revealing the apartment's interior. The space was modern, spacious, decorated with expensive furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the glowing city skyline. Tennis trophies and framed photos lined the walls like a personal shrine. At first glance, it looked like the polished home of a champion. But up close, the unsettling details told another story. In the bathroom sink, dark residue clung to the drain. Dried bits of peeling skin tangled with strands of hair. One of the mirrors was smeared with something that looked like rust, but the sharp metallic smell made it clear it was blood. On a nearby table, shattered rackets were stacked haphazardly, like they'd been broken in fits of rage. Steve moved through the apartment in silence, shotgun in hand, scanning every corner. Joanna, more cautious, studied the room with sharp eyes. She opened her notebook and scribbled a few quick notes. He's trying to act out Alcaraz's life, but he can't cover up the mess he leaves behind. Suddenly, a creak echoed from the back bedroom. Steve spun toward the sound, body tense, shotgun ready. Joanna gripped her silver knife, moving beside him. They entered the room. The bed was untouched, perfectly made, as if no one had ever laid in it. But the floor told another story. Deep scratch marks like furniture had been dragged to block the door at some point. Steve crouched down, running his hand over the grooves. He knew we'd come here. Joanna took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment as if piecing together a puzzle. When she opened them, her expression was resolute. This isn't just a hideout, it's a trap. The champion's perfect apartment now revealed itself for what it really was, a stage carefully set by a predator. Suddenly, a shadow crossed the hallway. The shapeshifter, still wearing the flawless appearance of Carlos Alcaraz, stepped out from the dim light. There was no more effort to mimic the public charm. His gaze was cold, empty, and his clenched teeth revealed something feral underneath. With a sharp motion, he knocked over a shelf full of trophies, sending metal and glass crashing to the floor. Steve fired the shotgun. The blast rocked the apartment, and the creature was thrown against the wall. But it got up instantly, the wound closing under its false skin. In a flash, it lunged at Steve, slamming him onto a coffee table that shattered beneath them. Joanna charged with the silver knife, but the shapeshifter spun and struck her hard. She crashed into the couch, the air forced from her lungs in a gasp. The creature stepped toward her. "You really think you can erase me? The world already believes I'm the real one." Steve rose, blood trickling from his forehead, and pulled the shotgun again. He fired once more, the impact throwing the enemy back onto the dining table. Joanna seized the moment and drove the knife into the creature's shoulder. It roared, its skin twitching as if struggling to hold on to the human form. The fight spilled across the entire apartment. Chairs flew, shelves toppled, shattered trophies littered the floor. The once pristine penthouse now looked like a war zone. Steve slipped on the debris, nearly losing the shotgun, but held onto it. Joanna, her arm aching from the earlier hit, still found the strength to move forward, eyes locked on the silver blade. Her only real shot at ending this. The shapeshifter lunged for her throat, but Steve tackled it, dragging it down. On the floor, the three of them wrestled with brutal blows, flesh against flesh, metal against bone, the sounds echoing through the space. The air was thick with the stench of sweat, blood, and burning skin, almost too heavy to breathe. At last, Steve managed to push back far enough to aim the shotgun at point-blank range. He fired, opening the way for Joanna, exhausted but focused, to drive the silver knife straight into the creature's chest. The scream that followed wasn't human. It was guttural, broken, like it came from more than one throat at once. The shapeshifter's body twisted violently, its skin peeling off in soaked, curling sheets that fell to the floor. Its muscles gave out, and it collapsed heavily onto the carpet. For the first time since they'd entered the apartment, silence truly took hold. Steve dropped to the floor beside the body, breathing hard. Joanna, still standing, leaned against the wall, the knife dripping with something thick and foul. Outside, the city kept glowing, unaware of what had just happened inside. Steve got to his feet with effort, wiping the blood from his forehead. He looked at his sister and let out a heavy sigh. One more monster no one will ever know existed. Joanna cleaned the knife with a cloth and put the blade away. Her voice was steady, but there was a quiet sadness beneath her words. What matters is it'll never steal someone's life again. Without drawing attention, the siblings left the apartment just as they had entered. Out on the street, they slipped into the Mustang parked a few blocks away. The engine rumbled softly, a comforting sound in the middle of the chaos. Steve turned on the radio just to break the silence, but shut it off right away when the news started praising Carlos Alcaraz's historic victory. He looked at Joanna with a tired smile. At least the real one's still alive. That's a win in itself. Joanna rested her head against the seat, watching the city lights reflect in the window glass. Steve turned the wheel and pulled the car onto the road, leaving the stadium lights farther and farther behind. For the siblings, it was just another night on the job. But for Carlos Alcaraz, it would forever be the day he nearly lost not just a trophy, but his very identity. If you've made it this far, congrats. You survived another encounter with the impossible. But don't even think about sleeping easy, because the next case from the Myers siblings is even worse. A creature that mimics human voices to lure its victims into the forest. Yeah, it's just as creepy as it sounds. And the worst part? It could be calling you right now. Click the video next to this one and keep following the investigation. Oh, and tell me in the comments, if a creature copied the voice of someone in your family, would you resist? And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That way you won't miss any new supernatural investigations. Because here, what sounds like fiction might be closer than you think.